Dear Jason, I read the texts between you and your dad from Sunday. You are missing the message of your father's love and concern for you. You two are so alike. Your passion for your beliefs, your conviction that you are verifiably right, your desire to have everyone you care about also believe what you do. You are the image of your father. What a deep relationship you two would have if you both believe the same thing. Meanwhile, you two are missing years of time together. Could you find a way to relate to your father on a different level? He's 80 years old. I fear that he will pass away someday with the two of you estranged. The message in 1 Corinthians 13:4-8 is that love does not keep account of the injury. It bears, believes, and hopes all things. It never fails. How you honor your father is a choice you can make. Could you choose to be warm and loving on just a social level? Hi Dad, how are you doing? Text or phone call would mean so much to him. A few minutes of superficial chit-chat is all I'm suggesting. It would be a start. I understand you are close to selling your property. Let's try to find a warm and peaceful way to relate to each other before you move away. Love you, Mom.
Dearest Mom, here is my response to your letter. As you have asked for, I'm going to attempt to relate to my dad in a different way. But keep in mind I only have one father, and it is my Creator in heaven, Jehovah. Due to Dad's age and his propensity to sit in front of the TV, I'm going to make a video response with visuals that should make this very easy to understand. There is nothing that I have not forgiven you and Dad for, and I bear no resentment. But having confronted the two of you with the truth and having seen your reaction, I've been forced to address how it could be possible for my own parents to even look into the evidence that heliocentrism is the great deception. While reflecting on my upbringing, it has become stunningly obvious to me that you have never really taught me anything. The same will not be said about me with regards to you. Let's begin. Let's begin by getting a correct understanding of just how long this heliocentric model has been around and who it came about by. While the sphericity of Earth was widely recognized in Greco-Roman astronomy from at least the 3rd century BC, the Earth's daily rotation and yearly orbit around the Sun was never universally accepted until the Copernican revolution. While a moving Earth was proposed at least from the 4th century BC in Pythagoreanism, and a fully developed heliocentric model was developed by Aristarchus of Samos in the 3rd century BC, these ideas were not successful in replacing the view of a static spherical Earth, and from the 2nd century AD, the predominant model which would be inherited by medieval astronomy was the geocentric model, described in Ptolemy's Amalgamist. Yeah, I did read that correctly. It wasn't until the 4th century that somebody had even proposed that Earth was moving, and it was Pythagoras and his cult. A heliocentric model wasn't even invented for another century, and then it was pit in a false dichotomy, heliocentrism versus geocentrism, both assuming Earth to be a globe. Until this time, nobody had even considered the possibility of Earth moving, no less be a globe. So if Earth was first proposed to be moving in the 4th century BC by the Pythagoreans, let's find out more about them. Under a search for who first proposed the sphericity of Earth, we get Pythagoras. Early Greek philosophers alluded to a spherical Earth, though with some ambiguity. Pythagoras of Samos, 570 to 495 BC, was an ancient Greek philosopher and eponymous founder of Pythagoreanism. He founded a secret mystery school and is credited with being the founder of vegetarianism. Let's scroll down here and find out where it is that Pythagoras learns the things that he taught under alleged travels. Citations from Antiphon and Porphyry that Pythagoras learned to speak Egyptian from the pharaoh Amasis II himself. that he studied with the Egyptian priests at Diosphilus, and that he was the only foreigner ever to be granted the privilege of taking part in their worship. Plutarch writes in his treatise on Isis and Osiris that during his visit to Egypt, Pythagoras received instruction from the Egyptian priest Onufus of Heliopolis. According to Clement of Alexandria, Pythagoras was a disciple of Seleucus, an Egyptian arch-prophet, as well as Plato of Secnufus of Heliopolis. Some ancient writers claim that Pythagoras learned geometry and the doctrine of metempsychosis from the Egyptians. Other ancient writers claim that Pythagoras learned his teachings from the Magi in Persia or even Zoroaster himself. The Phoenicians are reputed to have taught Pythagoras arithmetic, and the Chaldeans to have taught him astronomy. Others claim that he studied under Hindu sages, and also the Celts and Iberians. Under the topic of alleged Greek teachers, we see that other traditions claim the mythic bard Orpheus as Pythagoras' teacher, thus representing the Orphic mysteries. We also see that Lambritius describes Pythagoreanism as a synthesis of everything Pythagoras had learned from Orpheus, from the Egyptian priests, from the Eleusinian mysteries, and from other religious and philosophical traditions. So notice here under teachings, the number one thing he's known for is metempsychosis. Aristotle writes at length about the teachings of the Pythagoreans, but without mentioning Pythagoras directly. One of Pythagoras' main doctrines appears to have been metempsychosis, the belief that all souls are immortal and that after death a soul is transferred into a new body. Notice under the topic of mysticism, he believed in the harmony of the spheres, maintaining that planets and stars played music that was inaudible. Under the topic of numerology, according to Aristotle, the Pythagoreans used mathematics for solely mystical reasons, devoid of practical application. The number 3 was an ideal number because it had a beginning, middle, and end, and was the smallest number of points that could be used to define a plane triangle, which they revered as a symbol of the god Apollo. 10 was regarded the perfect number, and the Pythagoreans honored it by never gathering in groups larger than 10. Pythagoras was credited with devising the tetractys, the triangular figure of 4 rows which add up to the perfect number 10. The Pythagoreans regarded the tetractys as a symbol of utmost mystical importance. Lambritius, in his Life of Pythagoras, states that the tetractys was so admirable and so divinized by those who understood it that Pythagoras' students would swear oaths by it. Attributed discoveries in mathematics. The Pythagorean theorem was known and used by the Babylonians and Indians centuries before Pythagoras, but it is possible that he may have been the first one to introduce it to the Greeks. Note that the Pythagorean theorem is just that, a theory and fatally flawed. Pythagoreans knew that the only numbers that could exist in reality are rational numbers, and it did not take long for a student to realize that the square root of 2 was irrational, along with all other square roots other than of perfect squares. For more information on that topic, please see my video Irrational Numbers Are a Logic Error, Flat Earth Math, published January 19, 2017. In astronomy. In ancient times, Pythagoras and his contemporary Parmenides of Elea were both credited with having been the first to teach that Earth was spherical. By the end of the 5th century BC, this fact was universally accepted among Greek intellectuals. Notice it was not universally accepted, it was universally accepted among Greek intellectuals, or Pythagoreans. It says here that many early Christians had a deep respect for Pythagoras. Eusebius compares him to Moses. The church father Jerome credits Pythagoras with the doctrine of the immortality of the soul. And Augustine defends Pythagoras' reputation in his book On the Trinity, which is a doctrine that comes from Pythagoras' worship of the triangle and the number 3, arguing that Pythagoras certainly never taught the doctrine of metempsychosis or immortality of the soul, which is what Church Father Jerome had credited him with. These were not Christians, they were Pythagorean occultists which we see all the time in big-name philosophers, astronomers, mathematicians, and scientists of the Vatican. I'm going to scroll past on modern science for the second, and we'll come back to it. On the topic of vegetarianism, this sentence here, until the word vegetarianism was coined in the 1840s, vegetarians were referred to in English as Pythagoreans. On Western esotericism, early modern European esotericism drew heavily on the teachings of Pythagoras. Johannes Reuchlin synthesized Pythagoreanism with Christian theology and Jewish Kabbalah, arguing that the Kabbalah and Pythagoreanism were both inspired by Mosaic tradition and that Pythagoras was therefore a Kabbalist. Reuchlin compared the Pythagorean Tetractys to the ineffable divine name YHWH, or Yahweh, describing each of the four letters of the Tetragrammaton a symbolic meaning according to the Pythagorean mystical teachings. Note that Kabbalists like Reuchlin tried to ascribe esoteric meanings to the Tetragrammaton, which is the true name of the Creator and appears in the Bible over 7,000 times. The true name of the Creator is pronounced Yahweh, and for details on that research, please see my video, What is the True Name of the Creator and the Christ? Henrik Agrippa cites Pythagoras as a religious magi and indicates that Pythagoras' mystical numerology operates at a super-celestial level. The Freemasons deliberately modeled their society of the community founded by Pythagoras. Rosicrucianism used Pythagorean symbolism, as did Robert Fudd, John Dee. Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, was a strong admirer of Pythagoras, and in his book Pythagoras, he advocated that society should be reformed to be more like Pythagoras' commune. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart incorporates Masonic and Pythagorean symbolism into his opera The Magic Flute. Let's scroll back up here to On Modern Science, and I'll make my point as to why I've been going into a lot of detail as to who Pythagoras was and what he taught. Now we will see who is responsible for modern-day Pythagoreanism. In his preface to his book On the Revolution of the Heavenly Spheres, Nicholas Copernicus cites various Pythagoreans as the most important influences on the development of his heliocentric model of the universe. Johannes Kepler considered himself to be a Pythagorean. He believed in the Pythagorean doctrine of musica universalis, and it was his search for the mathematical equations behind this doctrine that led to his discovery of the laws of planetary motion. Kepler titled his book the subject Harmonicus Mundi, harmonics of the world, after the Pythagorean teaching that had inspired him. Sir Isaac Newton firmly believed in the Pythagorean teaching of the mathematical harmony and order of the universe. Though Newton was notorious for rarely giving others credit in their discoveries, he attributed the discovery of the law of universal gravitation to Pythagoras. Albert Einstein believed that a scientist may also be a Platonist or a Pythagorean insofar as he considers the viewpoint of logical simplicity as an indispensable and effective tool of his research. The English philosopher Alfred Whitehead declared that Einstein and other modern scientists like him are following the pure Pythagorean tradition. So, Mother Dearest, you may be asking yourself, why did I share all that about the satanic occultist Pythagoras? The reason I shared all that is because the letter you sent me had a cover letter, which I just read, and 5 pages of copy and paste with absolutely no explanations for what these formulas are. You didn't go into any effort to explain any of this to me. I'm going to show you who you give your authority to and who you worship. Ronnie Harris of the Limitless channel and myself just did an extensive breakdown of the occultist Sir Isaac Newton in a recent hangout, but I will give you some of the highlights to whet your appetite.
Lots 1 to 332.
In 1936, a massive archive of Sir Isaac Newton's private manuscripts was put on sale. after being kept from the public for more than 200 years.
Of knowledge. Should we say 3? Thank you, sir. £3.
The famous economist John Maynard Keynes acquired 100 lots. For the next 6 years, Keynes worked on breaking the mysterious code in which many were written. These documents drew Keynes into a world inhabited by charlatans and magicians, the world of alchemy. Once Keynes decoded these documents, his view of Newton was shattered.
Well, yeah, I can tell you why. I mean, my view of him is shattered too. His personal notes, you're going to see, make him visible as the satanic occultist that he was.
He realized Britain's most famous scientist was also Britain's most knowledgeable alchemist.
Newton came to be thought of as the first and greatest of the modern age of scientists, a rationalist, one who taught us to think on the lines of cold and untinctured reason. I do not see him in that light. Newton was not the first of the age of reason. He was the last of the magicians.
You catch that?
Yeah, that's bad. This is really bad.
He became fascinated by the force that held the moon in orbit and caused apples to fall. Surely gravity was a divine force, not a matter of chance. Newton was obsessive. In 18 months he became the greatest mathematician in the world and invented calculus that enabled him to study the movements of planets in later years.
Yeah. Did you catch that? He invented calculus. He invented calculus, which was able to allow him to study the...
To describe.
Yeah, to describe.
Mathematically describe the motions of the heavenly luminaries, and then thus by creating the Earth as a moving object through an infinite space where everything was relative of everything else, right? This is where it originated from.
Newton himself wanted to design a universe in which God was absolutely present and absolutely powerful. There's an enormous irony there. In the 18th century, gangs of interpreters, most of them French, will take the God out of Newton's world, and we will be left with a clockwork universe. I mean, it's a very common image of what the Newtonian world was, that it was soulless, that it was mechanical, that it was a piece of clockwork, that it really wasn't theologically motivated at all.
To this day, this purely mechanical picture of Newton's universe is still accepted worldwide.
That's a fact. I mean, it's
ridiculous, man.
That's what
He held the prism up to the sunlight and colors shine on the wall. He figured out. No, he didn't figure out anything, man.
No, in fact, his stuff with prisms and light were further shown to be wrong and corrected. So he really, I don't know that he has anything of value whatsoever that he's given, because gravity is utter nonsense. His light work was wrong. Oh, his alchemy, that he knew how to make fool's gold, and that made him really, really rich and the head of the mint. His alchemy.
Alchemy was Newton's dark secret.
Wow.
For 25 years, from about 1668, Newton devoted himself to this illegal and clandestine practice.
Yeah, illegal, and it's not just illegal. It's these recipes are with like the blood of a sordid whore. It's
that pinch of a frog's back, and
yes, it's just like all the other witchcraft. This is, the alchemist is, usually a guy. And it's been sort of like whitewash as just being metallurgy, but there's spells, incantations, and it's a form of witchcraft.
Newton believed God had handed down his secrets to disciples like Noah, and that they survived in fragmented form in scripture, ancient text, myths, and especially in alchemical literature.
He never loses faith in alchemy.
Alchemical literature
So-
was illegal, and they wrote in all these coded, sorted blood of menstrual horror stuff.
It was the fallen angels who taught men metallurgy. It's Enoch documented it clearly. It wasn't Yahushai or Yahweh. This is complete heresy. Like, if anybody wants to deny me on that, all you have to do is read the first book of Enoch, and you're going to find out that it was the fallen angels.
Newton felt he was specially chosen by God to decode them.
He writes his name in Latin, Isaacus Newtonus, and he plays around with the anagram and he turns it into Jehovah, Sanctus,
What?
Unus, one.
Yes.
Jehovah?
Yeah, right here.
He calls himself God.
Well, keep in mind that he's working for the Vatican, and the guy who made up the letter J and made up the letter V had just done so, before he was on the scene. So these were brand new letters coming out of the Vatican. Yeah, so like as an anagram, because his name was Isaac, and the I was now being, the J was being used. So he made up this name Jehovah Sanctus Unus, or Jehovah the Great One, and this was his pen name. Right? These guys worked under aliases. They had pen names, just like Sir Samuel Rowbotham went under the pen name Parallax. This is another Freemasonic thing.
Francis Bacon was Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here in this article, he pursued alchemy and Arianism. And that makes me so sick. I was raised Jehovah's Witness, and the reason why this information I'm going through right now is because my mom had sent me a letter. I'm going to make a video about this, but I've been pushing on my parents to care about the truth, and here they are, still Jehovah's Witnesses, still believing that they're on a spinning ball flying through space, and it's beyond obvious now that they are part of the satanic cult of heliocentrism, and they worship at the feet of like a Sir Isaac Newton. They're cult followers.
Newton believed that through alchemy he was finding God's secrets.
You might be getting some secrets revealed to you, but it's not from the creator of this world. It's from Satan, the devil.
This strange mix of what was called vulgar chemistry, myth and mystical imagery helped form his unique perception of the world. He researched the history of Christianity and became convinced that both the Catholic and the Anglican Church were founded on a corruption of the Word of God.
That's true.
Now, because
but it's a false dichotomy. He's gonna swap out one heretical teaching for another.
Because Newton was so convinced that God is extremely powerful and unique, Newton, as the saying goes, reads himself into heresy. In other words, Newton begins to minimize, to play down, eventually to deny the divinity of Christ.
And Newton comes to the conclusion very early on that the Trinity is a blasphemy on the first commandment.
That's bad. Deny that Yahushua was God. That's exactly what the Antichrist spirit does.
A heretic, like a witch, is a threat, not just to truth, but to you. It's a physical threat. It's going to compromise and corrupt the community. So very often, we know from witch hunts, the mob, the people, will take direct action against these sorts of individuals.
So yeah, if he was caught practicing this alchemy, the good Christians back then that know that this is wrong would have probably hunted him down and burned him. That's how you deal with a witch or a sorcerer.
Well, another thing that's really crazy about that is that I read an article on the Drudge that said that America, the women are like some crazy amount. I think the amount of witches now outnumber the Christians.
And that's the reason why this world needs to burn.
Scary.
Get rid of all those witches.
Newton became convinced God foresaw that the Catholics would corrupt pure Christianity.
I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, and decked with gold, and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth.
The commentator here is going to make it sound like Isaac was against all this, but it's pretty obvious from the position that he's in that he was glorifying it, and that he knows that he's part of Mystery Babylon. He's like one of the top guys in it, president of the Royal Society, and the Vatican. That's where the great deception, heliocentrism, comes from. And here you've got one of the top magicians that promote it.
After seeing the king's advisors, Newton attended his first meeting of the...
They're all wearing dresses and wigs, bro. This is tranny city. Like, straight out in the open. Nobody even said anything that they were dressing like women. Completely.
The Royal Society, the leading scientific body.
Scientific, yes.
Satanic.
Satanic.
Newton was just 33, but most members of the society held him in awe.
Yep.
Go figure.
Got the shout out.
Newton's hidden alchemy seemed to be giving new insights into science and also into God's way. His grand project was to understand all God's secrets, of the creation, of the forces that held the universe together, and of God's plans for the second coming of Christ and the return to pure Christianity.
And he ultimately becomes convinced that he is in fact special. He has the special confidence of God.
Newton thought ancient temples also held secrets only chosen people like himself could unravel.
And the Masons.
He was fascinated by...
Right. Because they built them. And well, we'll get to that. You know, the secrets are within the Great Pyramids and Stonehenge, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they made them.
Yeah, not that long ago.
In his hand, Halley had the seeds of Newton's The Principia Mathematica, published in 1687.
It is the greatest book of science ever written, bar none.
Wow.
This is saying that something on one end of the universe, billions of miles away, actually exerts an attraction through all the intervening material on one tiny particle on the other side of the universe. That is an extraordinary thought. And in my view, and the view of everybody else who's looked at it, there is simply nothing like that in physics up to that point.
Yeah.
Newton had grown very close to a brilliant young mathematician and alchemist, Nicola Fatio de Douillet.
Pray, let me know by line or two whether you can have lodgings for us both in the same house at present, or whether you would have me take some other lodgings.
All right, so here's about lodgings, living with some other dude.
I am yours, most affectionately to serve you.
But in 1692, Fatio, a hypochondriac, wrote to tell Newton that he was dying.
I last night received your letter, with which how much I was affected, I cannot express. Pray, procure the advice and assistance of physicians before it be too late. And if you want any money, I will supply you. Sir, with my prayers for your recovery I rest. Your most affectionate and faithful friend to serve you.
I doubt that Newton had a physical relationship with Fatio.
Why would you doubt that, Dr. Rob?
But it's quite clear from the correspondence between them that these caused Newton to become emotionally disturbed.
Fatio lived, but a year later this relationship disintegrated. Newton then had a breakdown, accusing his few friends of misdeeds of which they were entirely innocent. He wrote to the diarist Samuel Pepys, president of the Royal Society.
I'm extremely troubled at the embroilment I am in, and have not slept well this 12-month, nor have my former consistency of mind. I never designed to get anything by your interest, nor by King James's favour. But am now sensible that I must withdraw from your acquaintance, and see neither you nor my great friends any more.
Newton also wrote an even more vicious letter to his friend John Locke. Newton accused him of trying to
broil me with women.
And when told Locke was ill, wrote,
"'Twere better if you were dead."
So somebody came out and said, "Hey, just get yourself a girlfriend." And he comes back with, "You'd be better off dead."
Wow.
Yeah, Newton was a homo. He was a fag. So there were a few clips from the Limitless channel of myself's Beyond Flat Earth hangout titled Sir Isaac Newton Exposed, Mystery Babylon Revealed. Globe believers are part of a satanic cult. Streamed live December 1st, Winter Solstice 2018. But there is more, a lot more, about Sir Isaac Newton. We have only scratched the surface. Sir Isaac Newton and the Doomsday Temple revealed Sir Isaac Newton, the grand architect of modern mathematics, physics, and optics, practiced ancient psychomagic to drive a deeply mystical, hidden, apocalyptic agenda. Albeit the last sentence is highly counterintuitive, every word is accurate. 2 centuries after Newton's death, thousands of unpublished papers revealed this master of the universe was a heretical magician who, under the noses of Europe's political and religious leaders, was secretly Europe's leading alchemist in esoteric communion with ancient spirits. Having spent 5 decades exploring the macro and micro mechanics of the universe seeking a date for Armageddon, Newton finally decoded it from the measurements and proportions of the legendary Solomon's Temple. He also said that the world would end in 2060 AD, but then later changed it to 2016. Newton the Alchemist. Sir Isaac Newton and the Doomsday Temple. As Newton matured, he became more heavily absorbed in esoteric thinking. He distanced from his previous Cartesian mechanistic worldview, and this transition made him a perfect candidate for Freemasonry. Perfect candidate, right? He was a founding father along with the other occultists at the Royal Society in the Vatican. It goes on, Freemasonry maintains the wisdom of ancient cultures through a series of metaphorical rituals called degrees, based on biblical events and buildings. It is Sir Isaac Newton that is credited with devising the architecture for the Freemasons and Rosicrucians and all the other secret societies that use the 2-pillar symbology along with the checkerboard, the 2 balls, the pyramid, the 1 eye, and a host of other symbols. Everything in this image is attached to satanic symbology. Now this is the kind of stuff you can't make up. It says, "To all the free and arrested Masons, greetings on the face of the globe." See, at this point, I guess they weren't burning them anymore, but these heretics were being locked up. Conclusions. Behind his Christian veneer, Sir Isaac Newton was a deeply mystical occultist obsessed with ancient mystical texts and obscure spiritual dynamics. Now we know Newton a little better, let's have a look at that story about the apple falling on his head and inspiring his law of gravity. There is no moment in 1666 or any other year where a theory of gravity occurred to Newton in a flash. He would continue to muse over gravity for 2 decades, and much of his earliest writings on the subject are in Latin, a language he did not adopt until 1667 at the earliest. The apple story reflects Eve in the Garden of Eden being tempted by the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge. Newton sought unholy esoteric knowledge through the study of alchemy and occult practice, and just like Eve, he ate the fruits of knowledge. I could go on and on about Sir Isaac Newton, knighted Freemason, but let's wrap him up with what the homosexual community has to say about him. He is clearly the reason why the LGBTQ community use the rainbow or the spectrum as their MK Ultra symbology, along with the use of the colors pink and violet. The documentary I showed you clips of earlier skipped over another man Newton shared a room with. In 1663, Newton began to share rooms at Cambridge with John Wickens. They lived together for 20 years. In that time, they became very close, hardly surprising. Young John assisted Newton in his early experiments, including those into the colors of the rainbow. Though whether John understood what Newton was doing is another question. Whether they were actually lovers will never be known, but as was common practice right up to the 20th century, it is known that they slept together. By slept together, I mean slept together. The academic curriculum at universities at the time was based on the classics, and all young undergraduates would have been taught about the ancient Greeks and their same-sex practices. It is possible that many students would have secretly followed the practice themselves in imitation of the great civilization and wouldn't have considered it immoral or sodomy. I want to make a few points perfectly clear, Mom and Dad, because you still practice Jehovah's Witnessism. The name Jehovah was created by Sir Isaac Newton, President of the Royal Society, head of the Mint, alchemist, necromancer, founding father of Masonry and many offshoot secret societies, and a sodomite himself. The man who credited Pythagoras for his crowning achievement of creating a theory of gravity. It was his pen name, Jehovah, supposedly an anagram of his name, but not even. Just utilizing two new letters created in 1524 by Gian Giorgio Trissino, who was working for the Vatican. He was under the protection of 3 popes and was named nuncio or ambassador to Germany by 2 of them. It was 1524 when he turned heads with his book, in which he proposed to reform Italian orthography by adding the following letters to distinguish sounds of spoken language. These were the 5 changes that he proposed, but only 2 of them stuck, the letter V and the letter J. As a practicing Jehovah's Witness, you are actually praying to Sir Isaac Newton's alias or pen name. Also, the occultist Newton is responsible for the proliferation of Arianism. Arianism is a non-Trinitarian Christological doctrine which asserts the belief that Jesus Christ or Yahushua is the Son of God who was begotten by God the Father at a point in time, a creature distinct from the Father and is therefore subordinate to him, but the Son is also God. That right there is an irrational statement. But the Arian concept of Christ is based on the belief that the Son of God did not always exist but was begotten within the time by God the Father. That is what Jehovah's Witnesses teach. The New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures is a translation of the Bible published by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society and distributed by Jehovah's Witnesses. The Greek master text by the Cambridge University scholars B.F. Westcott and F.J. Hort was used as the basis for translating the New Testament into English. The committee also referred to Novum Testum and to works by Catholic Jesuit scholars Jose M. Bovar and Augustinus Merck. Westcott and Hort were well-known occultists and provided the foundation for Arianism and the denial of hell as a place of torment for the sinners. The New World Order translation reads at John 1:1, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God?" All of these other translations got it right. And I ask you, what's more heretical, to believe in the Trinity or to believe in Arianism? A particle of a tire rotating around an axle, a tetherball around its post, and the seats of a Ferris wheel can all be described by F equals ma. Centripetal acceleration, a measure of how sharply an object is turning, is equal to the square of the velocity divided by the turning radius. This formulation is crucial and must be accurate for vehicle design, carnival ride design. It is true that vehicles and carnival rides make great visuals for debunking heliocentrism, and the truth is hidden in plain sight. If you were a speck on this tire rotating around an axle that represented a human at the equator of a spinning Earth, you'd be accelerating and decelerating.
Now I want you to watch the motion of this white spot. You probably see the spot moving in a circle. But this is what its path is actually like in the Earth's frame of reference.
If you were to do the math, with Earth spinning over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, 66,000 miles per hour around the Sun, and over 500,000 miles per hour around the galaxy, the acceleration and deceleration would be beyond anything our minds can conceptualize. This carnival ride makes people vomit at a few miles per hour, but the occultists want you to pay attention to the Ferris wheel in the background that only rotates in a fixed frame of reference. Gravity. Gravity is not a planetary force. It's not a force at all. It's a farce, and it definitely is not planetary. Planetary is a supposition, and based off of the Pythagorean mystery school deception, the Earth is moving and that it's spherical. It is a lie that was necessary to reconcile the impossibility of water and other stuff being held upside down on an Earth if it was in fact spherical. Your copy and paste cites the Cavendish experiment, and I'd like you to do a simple experiment yourself. In 1798, Henry Cavendish used large lead balls in an experiment to measure the strength of gravitational attraction between them. The attraction between them had nothing to do with the Earth or Sun or Moon or any other celestial body typically associated with gravity. Simply, the masses of lead balls were involved. What I'd like you to do, Mom and Dad, is to go out to your shed and hang up 2 lead balls. Then, from the farthest place you can, use a telescope to observe the lead balls and tell me how much Earth weighs. That's what Henry did. Check it out. Henry Cavendish, FRS, or Fellowship of the Royal Society, was an English natural philosopher, scientist, and an important experimental theoretical chemist or alchemist, and physicist. Cavendish is noted for his discovery of hydrogen and what he called inflammable air. Henry's father was Lord Charles Cavendish, and the family was connected to many aristocratic families of Great Britain. At age 18, he entered the University of Cambridge and St. Peter's College. In 1760, Henry Cavendish was elected to both the Royal Society and the Royal Society Club. In 1765, he was elected to the Council of the Royal Society of London. Density of Earth. The most famous of those experiments, published in 1798, was to determine the density of Earth and became known as the Cavendish experiment. The experimental apparatus consisted of a torsion balance with a pair of 2-inch, 1.61-pound lead spheres suspended from the arm of a torsion balance, and 2 much larger stationary lead balls, 350 pounds. Cavendish intended to measure the force of gravitational attraction between the two. Using this equipment, Cavendish calculated the attraction between the balls from the period of oscillation of the torsion balance, and then he used this value to calculate the density of Earth. Henry found that Earth's average density is 5.48 greater than that of water. John Poynting notes that the data led to a value of 5.448, and indeed that is the average value of the 29 determinations Henry included in his paper. Yet it says that based on Henry's results, one can calculate a value for G of 6.754, and the modern value is 6.67428. Right here we see massive deception. The value Henry gave was 5.48, and the calculation was the density of Earth versus water. His results were nothing like a value for G of 6.754. And the calculation for the density of earth versus water was based on measurements of hanging lead balls taken through a window? But that is only a fraction of the problem. Books often describe Cavendish's work as a measurement of either the gravitational constant g or the Earth's mass, since these are related to the Earth's density by a trivial web of algebraic relations. None of these sources are wrong, but they do not match the exact word choice of Cavendish, and this mistake has been pointed out by several authors. Cavendish's stated goal was to measure the Earth's density, although his result obviously calculates g to do so. Ouch! That hurt my head. That is one of the most ignominious statements I have ever heard. That sentence clearly states that Henry's experiment was clearly a begging the question logic fallacy. This Pythagorean occultist magician's claim to fame was based on a logic fallacy? Of course, he's attempting to support a lie. It's funny the way Wiki ends this, saying, Henry's results also give the Earth's mass. But that's not all. Let's see what Wiki has to say about his personality. Cavendish inherited 2 fortunes that were so large. At his death, he was the largest depositor in the Bank of England. It's important to note he could only speak to one person at a time, and only if the person were known to him and a male. He only communicated with his female servants by notes, and his only social outlet was the Royal Society Club, whose members dined together before weekly meetings, of which he seldom missed. It can be inferred from what is known about Henry Cavendish that he was either a virgin or a homosexual. Considering that he was a Pythagorean and a member of the Royal Society, I heavily lean towards Henry being a fag. And by the way, Mom, your sacred geometry craftwork is Kabbalist and your monarch butterflies are MK Ultra. Also, hydrogen is not inflammable. It is combustible and it implodes.
Bind those 2 atoms together. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Oh my God! Isn't that amazing?
Everyone knew that the Earth was not spinning up until the time of Pythagoras. His occult mystery school was the first to even suggest the possibility. Pythagoras knew that he had to first propose Earth's movement to suggest that it's a sphere. Well, guess what? The Pythagoreans have survived up until this day. They worship Babylon the Great. They can be identified when they promote vegetarianism, veganism, homosexuality, transgenderism, cross-dressing, necromancy, divination, magic, alchemy, the heliocentric model, the AE map a model of a flat earth, and a host of other distinctive traits. It was the Vatican that super revived Mystery Babylon when it promoted and protected occultists like Sir Isaac Newton, Sir Francis Bacon, and a host of other sirs. From a core group of satanic occultists sprang a myriad of secret societies and organizations. These organizations that operate in the public and secret have been exposed to a large extent already, but it is now that these secret societies and public organizations have all been commonly linked. They are all Mystery School Pythagoreans, which originates with Mystery School Babylon. Keep in mind when you look at the placement of the Illuminati in these diagrams that the Illuminati is relatively new. It was founded on May 1st, 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. What organized people like Weishaupt were are satanic occultist Pythagoreans. During the 1600s, many of the secret societies were created and spread by the power of the Vatican. And it is now that Apollo is being thrown down.
Jesus answered and said unto them, Go, and show John again those things which ye do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them.
Dann auch nicht immer so klar. Und da sind sie dann, die Kenianer. Der nächste hier, Michael Kunyuga, hat sich nochmal nach vorne gearbeitet und ist völlig entkräftet, schafft es gar nicht mehr über die Ziellinie. Der muss noch ein paar Meter. Und von hinten kommt der nächste. Da muss er jetzt rüber und der krabbelt übers Ziel. Das ist ja Drama pur. Aber er hat es gerade noch so geschafft. Michael Kunyuga.
Met de vierdubbele schaar. Leonardo. Leonardo. Leonardo.
You've lost. You just don't know it. I've lost. Look at the board. I have. Move. Check. Good game.